Welcome back to another programming video. Today's topic is built-in functions. We are covering functions and reusability. Now, this is our plan for today. And like I said, we covering built-in functions. What are built-in functions? Think of it as prepackaged tools, tested code, or solutions that have been tested again and again and again, and have proven to work in most instances or most cases. And they now are coming by default inbuilt into Python, either you're using it online or locally in your machine, like it is in my case, or you're using it in the other platforms. And those functions, those proven solutions, are available for you to implement and reuse. Some of them I have used in my previous videos, and hence why I decided let's just cover some of those. And this is by no means the full list of built-in functions. I think it's practically impossible for me to cover all of them in one videos. Ideally, what you want to do is just kind of do some research and find out which ones are available, which one can be used, and maybe for the sake of avoiding having to, for example, implement a name for your variable that is already used by some of those functions, and then cause a little bit of chaos when your code runs, or maybe you want to avoid such. So that's probably one of the reasons why I would want to maybe see what's available. And like I said, the list is quite long, so you probably won't be able to know all of them. But it's good if you know some of them, or at least the most commonly used one, which is what I'm trying to do. Now, the first one here is the one called print, where print shows output basically. And you've seen me a couple of times hovering over a particular function, and then reading through some of this information. It's useful in cases where you kind of have you want to have a quick overview of what needs to be passed, or what the meaning of one parameters, because yes, they do take parameters, as you can see, value, separation, and file, flush, and so on. And also tells you what value a function may or may not return. In this case, print doesn't return anything, meaning it's just going to run, and whatever has been passed, it will process it within that code and display it. So shows output. That's basically it. And if we run the code, obviously we're going to see whatever we've passed in, nothing less, nothing more. So that is the one about one of the common one that I've used again and again and again without really explaining what it is. Now, the second one I want to touch on here is the data type. Now, data type is, I think in one of my previous videos, I did highlight the types, where we have strings, we have integers, we have floats, we have many more. So this one basically tells you what the data type is. Now, this can be true for a variable, for example. So if you say variable, you may say input is equal to, I'm just giving an example here, and we're going to say, for example, enter a number. And so this can be true for scenarios like this. I think this one makes more sense to implement. So instead of passing the hard-coded value, so I'm going to say var, for example, and if I run this code and I say 45, you can see I get a string. That's because input by default return a type string. So, and if I go around and just do something like this, where I surround this with an integer, so, and I do run the code one more time, and I say 45, I get an integer. So this is true for this scenario, and it's also true for a scenario where you're just passing a value directly in, And we're just going to comment this out so that we don't get similar output. You see, I get a string here because that's what I've been passed. And if I go ahead and then just change that to maybe 5.5 and run the code one more time, I get a float. So those are the cases that, you know, this I can cover in this example. So not the full, but these are the ones I can cover. Now, yeah, let's comment that out. Now we have length. I've used this one a couple of times. Can't remember exactly how many times, but basically length, len, which is short for length, it gets a length. In this case, I'm getting the length of the list, which is basically has items of 1, 2, 3, and 4. And a list, how do we know it's a list? Because it's open and close square bracket. And basically all that does, it's going to count the number of items within this list. So if I run the code, I get 4. Why 4? Because it's 0, position 0, 1, 2, 3. And 0 being a position, it sees as 4. So that's basically something to keep in mind. But you can just look at the items and it says, oh, well, there's just 4 items inside there. So very straight away, right? Yes, it is. And forget about the whole 0, 1, 2, 3, because that even makes things a little bit confusing. So you just count the number of items and then it gives you 4 straight away. So the other thing also we can do is pass in a string. So I'm going to pass in a string here and ask it to count. And it gives me a 6. Why 6? Because it counts every character within the string. So it's going to be, and even a space will be counted as a character. So that's something to keep in mind. So in this case, it's giving a 6, and that's because we have a P that's position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 characters, and therefore we're getting a 6 over there. Now we are going to be looking at an input. I touched a little bit on that on this second point, but it's another cool way to get data from a user in an active way, instead of having to hard code values from time to time. So you just want to use the word input, which is pretty straightforward in terms of terms. So you don't have to say input, something must come from somewhere and it has to be collected or something. So it's just simple to remember input. And obviously you're probably going to want to say output. Not sure, let's try it. I've never thought about it. If there's output, no, there isn't. So there is input, but there isn't output. So yes, you can get the name and the assigned value, which is a string, and then just print it there, and then voila, you have your input. And you can see Trevor. Now Trevor. And hi Trevor. So basically that's the whole purpose behind this, gathering information and doing some processing behind the scene. Now the next one on the list is these 3 items. Now in the first 2, we're going from a string to either an integer or float, and then adding a value of 1 and 5 respectively. And in the third example, we're going from a number to a string. So how do you how come there's no error for the third one? Yeah, there isn't, because a string plus a string gives you a string. Basically, it's just a way of putting 2 strings together using a plus sign. And the first 2 example, we have a string. Think of it as a scenario where we're probably getting values from a user, and that's a value is a string, and then we're passing it here and passing it here as well. And then depending on what it is that we want to do, we can either convert it to a float or convert it to an integer and do the calculation as needed. So those are the scenarios that I can think of from the top of my head. So in this case, it takes that and add 5, second add 1, 4.5, and then the last one is 100 days. And you cannot add a string to a number, hence why we're using integer. You can add a string to a number, That's hence why we're using a float in this case. And you cannot add a number to a string, and therefore we need to convert that to a string. So apple with apple, orange with oranges. So that's just the bottom line. Now, similar but slightly different example is going to be this sum. And usually, unlike here where we had to add numbers or we want to do 1 plus 2 plus 3, this sum allows you to go through the list. And you can see it says iterable integer, and it goes through each list automatically behind the scene and basically loop through and sum that in a very simple way, which is so cool because if you have a list of maybe 1,000 items and having to go through them in very long way, it's just incredible. But with just one line of code, you can achieve the sum of all the values that are inside and to the very end and just display them. So if you run that, you get 6 because we're just adding 2 or 1 plus 2 plus 3, and that gives you 6. And if you have 1,000, Python will run it without struggling. Now, more or less the same for the next two, and these are your max and minimum, giving you the maximum value, which is the highest value within the list of items that you passed in, and the minimum, which is the lowest value within the list of items that you pass in. So you just open close bracket, and that's basically it. And then Python will tell, hey, the highest here is 20, the lowest is 5, like you can see right here. And there's always a use case for this kind of things. Now I'm looking at round. Round is also another one. I probably use this one once or twice, can't remember exactly, but anyway, this one gives you the help you limit the decimal numbers, the length of your decimal places. So in this case, I've set it up to 2, meaning it's going to stop at 4 right here. So 1, 4, and if I run this, let's clear our dash. So if I run that, I get a 3.4. Now, something to keep in mind with this, which is maybe some of the stuff you discover as you go forward. If the value is less than 5, the third decimal place, assuming you've set it up to 2, so meaning you're only concerned with 3.14. But if the third value after the set limit is higher than 5 or higher or equal to 5, then it will turn out to be 1.15. So what I mean is, if I set it to 5, for example, if I rerun this, you can see that the value turns to 15 because it runs it up to the next number on the list. So, but if this value, the third one, is 4, you can see that we get a 3.14. Just minor things to keep in mind when using inbuilt functions and for your solution. Range takes in 3 parameters, and that's your stop. Stop is the required, start, and then steps. So if in this case, if you're passing only 1 parameters, Python consider that to be the stop, because ideally you don't want your range to run forever. So that's the default why it's going to stop at 4. And what that means is that it's going to run 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 is the 4th position is excluded. If I'm correct, yes, 0, 1, 2, 3, yes, and 4 is excluded. So it always starts from 0, but then you can specify the value of the start. In this case, you can add another variable. Yes, so maybe start from 0 or start from 1, and that becomes the start. And if you pass a third value, you want the step to be maybe 0.5. I'm not sure. We can try that and see what this step will be. And it throws an error, so that's not going to work. So we're going to say maybe 2. Let's see what comes out of that. There we go. So we get a 2 starting from 1. If you add 2 to 1, you get 3. And you add a 2 to 3, it becomes 5. And that's greater than the stop position. So that's just something to keep in mind when implementing this. But the range here, if you only pass one value, you get, yeah, that's the 4, meaning we're going to stop at 4. And that's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3. And it's always less than the number passed in. Okay, so that's all for this range. And then we have the last one, but not far from being the hardest. And this is help. This basically gives you the explanation or short description of what a particular function does. I often just hover over the function to get a quick view of what it is that I need to pass in and what will be returned. But if you want prefer this approach, I'll just put it in there for your knowledge, and it gives you help and it tells you what the value will return and so on and so forth. So cool stuff to do. You press the letter Q to quit, and that's basically it. That brings us to the end of this video. I hope you've learned something new. Until next time, keep well. Bye-bye.